My brother stole my clients while I built our business, so I let him crash alone. And what happened next left him humiliated forever. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I built my consulting business from scratch. When I say from scratch, I mean it. I spent countless nights in a cramped, second-floor apartment that smelled faintly of old carpet and instant coffee, staring at my laptop until my eyes blurred. Every client call, every spreadsheet, every invoice all ran through me. There wasn't a single day off, and weekends didn't exist. I ate late, slept late, and lived in a constant loop of what's next. Yet, despite the exhaustion, I felt alive. This was mine. Every late-night call, every late payment collected, every small victory felt like proof I was building something real. Ryan. My older brother had always been a different kind of person, smooth, charismatic, and confident in a way that made people listen. When he first suggested joining me, I'll admit, I was skeptical. He had a history of charm and half-baked promises, but this time he seemed different. He came by my apartment, leaned against the doorframe, and said, "Bro, I've got ideas to bring in some serious clients. Let me handle the networking. Your time is better spent on delivery." I remember feeling a rush of relief. For once, I didn't have to do everything alone. Over the next few weeks, Ryan threw himself into the work. He praised my ideas to clients, helped craft presentations, and even followed up with prospects with a persuasive ease I couldn't match. I watched him charm potential clients on video calls, his voice calm and convincing, while I typed furiously in the background, making sure deadlines were met. For the first time, I allowed myself to breathe. It was like having a teammate I could trust, someone who genuinely wanted to see this succeed as much as I did. And maybe, just maybe, I thought this would be the start of something bigger than just me. The apartment no longer felt suffocating when he was around. We celebrated small wins with cheap takeout and strong coffee, joking about the chaos of client demands, feeling like a real team. For the first time since starting, I believed we could actually pull this off together. The business was growing steadily, and my brother, my family, was finally here to share the load. I had no reason to doubt him, no reason to think trust could be misplaced, but deep down, a tiny part of me wondered if relying on family could ever be completely safe. I knew something was slightly off, but I didn't want to admit it. It started with little things: Ryan asking more detailed questions about client accounts than he ever had before, hovering over spreadsheets, casually remarking, "Who's handling this one again?" I brushed it off at first, convincing myself I was being paranoid. After all, we were partners now. Trust was supposed to be the foundation. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel that sense of relief that someone had my back. Days turned into weeks. Subtle inconsistencies started creeping in. Ryan would be on calls that I hadn't scheduled, and when I asked about them, he'd smile and say, "Oh, just catching up, making sure nothing falls through the cracks." I didn't think too much of it. I was too busy juggling client deadlines, invoices, and presentation decks. There were nights I went without sleep, sitting on the edge of my futon, headphones in, fielding calls while Ryan typed away on his laptop, claiming he was drafting proposals. Every time I glanced at him, I felt a twinge of doubt, but I pushed it down, trusting that family loyalty meant something. One morning, I noticed an email from a client addressed not to me, but to Ryan. They were confirming an appointment Ryan had set independently. "Hey, did you schedule this?" I asked him. He laughed, leaning back in his chair. "Just being proactive, man. You've got too much on your plate." His tone was easy, charming, effortless. I nodded, relieved that he was stepping up, even if the way he did it felt a little off. I kept telling myself it was part of growing the business. Still, a few clients started mentioning Ryan by name, praising him for taking the lead or being so responsive. I smiled on calls, proud of my brother, telling myself he was helping me look good. Every part of me wanted to believe him, to believe this was genuine support. But the seed of unease had been planted. My gut tightened whenever Ryan took control of a meeting or sent an unsolicited pitch. Something didn't sit right, but I swallowed it, because I was too invested in the vision we were building. And yet, as I watched him on a late-night Zoom call, laughing and confidently presenting to a client I had nurtured for months, a a flicker of doubt gnawed at me. Was this really just teamwork, or was there something I hadn't seen yet? I should have seen it sooner, but I didn't. Ryan had this effortless way of making things look natural, harmless even. By now, he was regularly taking the lead on client calls, drafting proposals without telling me, and occasionally forgetting to loop me in on decisions. At first, I convinced myself it was efficiency. He was helping the business grow while I buried myself in the behind-the-scenes chaos. I trusted him. I really did. But small cracks were beginning to show. One afternoon, I was reviewing our client list when I noticed a series of emails that didn't quite make sense. Clients I had personally nurtured were praising Ryan, mentioning how he had taken initiative or ensured deadlines were met flawlessly. The tone of the messages was warm, grateful, almost exclusive. I frowned at my screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Did he reach out to them independently? Without me? I tried to shake it off, telling myself he's just confident. Maybe he's trying to impress me. But that sinking feeling in my gut refused to disappear. Ryan's behavior became increasingly audacious. He'd casually check in with clients before I had a chance to, while sometimes quoting solutions I had drafted or pitching ideas I had spent hours refining. And he did it with that same charming, persuasive grin that disarmed everyone. One evening, after a long call where a client complimented Ryan's leadership, I finally asked, my voice tight but controlled, Ryan, "Did you reach out to them without me?" He shrugged casually, leaning back with a smile. "Just keeping things moving, man. You know, I've got your back." His confidence made me pause. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust him. But a flicker of doubt had turned into a small, persistent ember that night. I stayed at my desk long after Ryan left, staring at our client's spreadsheet and the growing trail of independent emails he had sent. I could feel my chest tighten with a mix of anxiety and anger. Is he just ambitious? Or is he stepping over me? The thought lingered like a shadow in the corner of the room, refusing to leave. I went to bed restless, haunted by the possibility that my brother, the one person I thought I could trust implicitly, might be hiding something from me, and as I drifted into a fitful sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much bigger problem. Something was coming. I just didn't know how bad it would get. The tension between us had grown, even if I didn't fully admit it to myself. I started noticing the small things: Ryan double-booking calls, leaving me out of critical email chains, casually dropping client names in conversations as if he owned the relationships. I tried to address it subtly at first. "Hey, I noticed you spoke with the Johnson account yesterday. Did I miss something?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Ryan leaned back in his chair, smirking, and said, "Just covering all bases, man. You've got so much on your plate. I figured I'd take the initiative." His charm was infuriating. I wanted to yell, to demand the truth, but the part of me that still trusted him held back. I nodded, forcing a smile, and walked away feeling uneasy. As the weeks went on, the discrepancies multiplied. Small errors began surfacing in Ryan's independent communications, misquoted rates, missed follow-ups, and confusing instructions that forced me to step in and clean up the mess. Every time I confronted him, he'd deflect with that same easygoing confidence. "Relax. I've got this. I'm making things smoother for you." It was maddening. I could see the cracks in his competence, but the clients hadn't noticed yet, and I couldn't risk showing panic. I buried my frustration beneath a veneer of professionalism, all while feeling my patience eroding. Even worse, I began feeling isolated in my own business. Clients started asking for Ryan by name, thanking him directly for his guidance. I smiled and nodded on calls, but internally, a storm was brewing. This isn't just about trust anymore. He's taking over the relationships I built. And yet, whenever I tried to assert myself, Ryan had this way of charming his way out of confrontation, leaving me doubting whether I was overreacting. The emotional weight of watching my brother quietly undermine my work while pretending to help was exhausting. Late one evening, I caught him on a call with a major client I'd spent months cultivating. I froze, listening to him pitch ideas I had meticulously planned. His tone confident, persuasive, almost like he was rehearsing for a performance. I felt a wave of dread crash over me. This was no longer subtle. Ryan was maneuvering as if the business were his own, and I knew, deep down, that I was about to face a choice. Confront him now and risk a fight, or wait and watch how far he was willing to go. It hit me like a punch to the gut one Tuesday afternoon. I was going through emails, double-checking our client communications, when I saw a tan email thread between Ryan and one of our biggest clients, completely bypassing me. He had pitched them an exclusive deal, offering discounts and personalized solutions I hadn't approved. My hands trembled as I read each line, disbelief and anger swirling together. He's been doing this behind my back this whole time. My stomach twisted with a mix of betrayal and helplessness. I had trusted him completely, let him into every aspect of my business, and he had been quietly undermining me. I confronted him immediately, my voice tight, barely controlled. "Ryan, what is this? You made promises to Johnson that weren't cleared with me. What the hell are you doing?" His grin didn't falter, but there was a flicker of something, maybe guilt, maybe amusement in his eyes. "Relax, bro. I'm just expanding our reach. You've got too much on your plate. I'm helping, not hurting." His words were casual, but my mind raced. Helping, this is sabotage. I felt my trust shatter like glass underfoot, each shard cutting deeper than the last. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dim glow of my laptop screen, staring at the client list Ryan had been quietly managing. Months of painstaking work, client relationships I had nurtured, were suddenly tainted by his hidden agenda. The anger bubbled inside me, hot and uncontrollable, but so did the fear. Confronting him further might ruin the business entirely, or worse, drive a wedge in the family I had once relied on. I felt trapped, watching the brother I loved morph into someone I barely recognized. By the next morning, a plan began forming in my mind. I didn't want a messy confrontation, not yet. I needed to understand the full scope of what he'd done. Every call he made, every email he sent, every deal he closed without my knowledge, I would document it all. I'd watch, wait, and gather evidence before taking action. But even as I steeled myself, I couldn't ignore the creeping anxiety gnawing at me. Ryan was clever, and I had no idea just how far he was willing to push before it all collapsed. I leaned back in my chair, fists clenched, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was about to lose everything I had built or if I could turn the tables before it. It was too late. I decided to stay calm and play it smart. Losing my temper wouldn't fix anything, it would only give Ryan an advantage. So I began observing him quietly, keeping track of every call, every email, every interaction with clients. I created spreadsheets, noting inconsistencies, cross-referencing promises, and quietly documenting every move he made. The more I dug, the clearer it became. He was overextending himself, promising clients things I hadn't authorized, juggling too many accounts without the skill or patience to handle them. And he had no idea I was watching during this period. I noticed subtle signs of strain on his deadlines, contradictory emails, and flustered explanations when clients followed up with questions he couldn't answer. He was confident on the surface, charming and persuasive, but cracks were forming. I even started planting small tests, giving him slightly more complicated client requests or sensitive details, and watching how he managed. Sometimes he fumbled, sometimes he improvised in ways that almost worked, and each time I felt a mix of vindication and apprehension. It was like watching a high-stakes game of chess. I held the pieces he didn't even realize existed. The stress wasn't just his. Every day I felt a mix of anger, exhaustion, and guilt. Part of me hated myself for letting it go this far, for not confronting him sooner. But another part, the part that had poured years of sweat, sleepless nights, and personal sacrifice into this business, felt a growing sense of anticipation. I was no longer just reacting. I was planning. Late one night, I overheard him on the phone with a client, boasting about taking the lead on multiple projects. His tone was confident, bordering on arrogant, and I felt that familiar mix of rage and grim satisfaction. I knew he was about to push too far, and when he did, there would be no coming back. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the dim glow of the laptop screen, the hum of the apartment quiet around me. Every small misstep he made was building towards something bigger. I didn't know exactly how it would end, but I knew one thing. I was ready to let him crash, and when he did, he wouldn't see it coming. I hit rock bottom one Friday afternoon, though I didn't realize it at first. A major client I had spent months cultivating called me in near panic, asking why Ryan had promised features and timelines that were impossible to deliver. I felt my chest tighten, a mix of anger, exhaustion, and betrayal coiling like a fist around my heart. All the late nights, all the work I had poured into the business, suddenly felt like it was slipping through my fingers. My brother, the one person I trusted, had turned my hard work into a mess I had to clean up. I remember pacing the apartment. The hum of the city outside, a dull, constant backdrop. My hands shook as I typed out emails to clarify mistakes Ryan had made. Each word carrying a weight of frustration I couldn't release. "Ryan, what were you thinking?" I typed, pausing repeatedly, trying to keep my tone professional. I hit send, staring at the screen, feeling a mix of dread and hopelessness. He replied almost immediately, smooth and unbothered. "Relax, bro. Clients will understand. I've got this under control." His confidence made my stomach twist. He doesn't get it. He never gets it. That night, I sat in the dim glow of my laptop, staring at the client list, tracking every error, every miscommunication. I felt completely alone, exhausted in body and spirit. It wasn't just the business I felt the personal betrayal like a knife in my back. I had let him in, let him have access. And now the foundation of everything I had built felt shaken. But amidst the despair, a flicker of clarity emerged. I realized I had the advantage. I knew everything he didn't. I had documentation, records, and a clear picture of how far he had overstepped. The thought gave me a grim sense of purpose. I would let him stumble, let him crash, and when it happened, he would have no one to blame but himself. I leaned back, closing my eyes, trying to steady my racing thoughts. I knew the coming weeks would be messy, possibly explosive, and deep down, I couldn't shake the creeping anticipation. He has no idea what's coming next. I decided it was time to set the trap. But I had to be careful. Ryan was clever, confident, and far too charming for a blunt confrontation to work. So I started documenting everything meticulously: emails, client calls, proposals, timelines, anything that could prove exactly what he had been doing behind my back. Every mistake, every overstep, every time he promised something without authorization, went into a growing archive I kept hidden from him. I knew that patience would be my ally. The longer I waited, the more the cracks in his carefully constructed facade would show. I also began giving him slightly more complex client requests, ones that required attention to detail and strict follow-ups. I watched from the sidelines as he juggled multiple deadlines, flustered and overconfident. One client requested a customized solution with a tight timeline, and I noticed him muttering under his breath, fumbling with emails and sending contradictory instructions. The arrogance was still there. He believed he could charm his way out of any problem. But the evidence of his incompetence was piling up. Meanwhile, Ryan had no idea I was observing him. He boasted openly to friends and even some clients about taking charge of the business, painting himself as the driving force behind growth. Each boast, each misstep, was a piece of the puzzle falling into place for me. I felt a dark satisfaction, mixed with a nagging guilt for enjoying his struggle, but I justified it. He had put me in this position by betraying my trust. One evening, as I watched him fumbling through a particularly complicated client call, I realized just how close he was to overextending himself completely. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his usual charm faltering as he tried to improvise solutions I knew were impossible. I could feel the tension in my own chest, the thrill of anticipation, the anxiety of how this would play out. I leaned back in my chair, the apartment quiet except for the soft hum of the laptop. I sipped my cold coffee, staring at my spreadsheets and thinking soon he won't have a single lifeline left. And when he falls, he'll have no one to catch him. The question lingering in the air was how spectacularly it would happen. The moment came faster than I expected. It was a Tuesday morning, and Ryan had completely overextended himself with a major client I had been nurturing for months. He had promised deliverables that were impossible to meet and made commitments he couldn't honor. When the client called me, frantic and confused, I felt a mix of anger and grim satisfaction. I knew this was it. Everything he had been building on charm and overconfidence was about to crumble. I decided it was time to confront him. Dice it strategically. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse, at least. Not yet. I pulled up every email, every message, every instance where he had gone behind my back, and presented it in a clear, undeniable way. "Ryan," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Look at this. Every commitment you made without my knowledge, every deal you promised, every client you went around me, and it's all here." His confident grin faltered for the first time. I saw the flash of panic in his eyes. It's the realization that I had been quietly watching him all along. Clients weighed in, confirming what I already knew. They were grateful for my guidance, but confused by Ryan's conflicting promises. His overconfidence had left him exposed, and now there was no way to recover without admitting his mistakes. I watched him stumble over explanations, his voice rising, trying to charm his way out, but it was useless. The room felt heavy with tension, the hum of the laptop, the only background noise as he realized the full scope of what he had done. The humiliation was subtle, but devastating. I didn't have to say much as mistakes spoke for themselves. And the worst part for him was that I remained calm, collected, and in control. I had let him believe he was running the show while quietly orchestrating his downfall. By the end of the confrontation, Ryan slumped back in his chair, speechless and defeated. I felt a strange mix of relief and lingering anger. He had finally faced the consequences of his own actions. But as I closed my laptop and leaned back, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the end of the story? Or was there still more fallout to come? The aftermath was surreal. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But the business and my relationship with Ryan was still in pieces. Clients were cautiously returning, some confused, some frustrated, but they respected the transparency I had maintained. Ryan, on the other hand, was visibly shaken. He had always relied on charm and confidence, but now, stripped of both, he was left facing the consequences of his overreach. Every misstep, every unfulfilled promise, was laid bare for him to confront. Ryan retreated into himself, floundering as he tried to salvage what was left of his reputation. Calls went unanswered, emails went unsent, and even casual conversations with clients felt awkward and forced. It was a humbling experience for him, and though part of me felt satisfaction, there was also a strange twinge of guilt. After all, he was my brother. But that guilt was tempered by clarity, had acted in the only way that would protect the business I had poured my life into. I, meanwhile, began rebuilding. I reached out personally to each client Ryan had mishandled, apologized for the confusion, and reaffirmed the value of my service. The process was exhausting, but it was necessary to restore trust. I felt a renewed sense of control, the adrenaline of crisis slowly giving way to cautious optimism. I realized just how much of the business's stability had depended on my vigilance, and I vowed never to take that for granted again, even in Ryan's humiliation. I found lessons that extended beyond the business. I reflected on trust, ambition, and boundaries, understanding that even family could betray if given the chance. I strengthened systems, implemented checks, and made it clear where responsibility truly lay. The apartment felt lighter, the hum of the laptop less oppressive, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to exhale. Yet in quiet moments, I still caught glimpses of Ryan, frustrated, humbled, and perhaps even resentful. The dynamic had changed irreversibly, and I couldn't help but wonder how he would rebuild himself. Knowing that the foundation he had relied on, my trust, was no longer his to exploit, looking back, I realized how much this entire ordeal had changed me. I spent weeks reflecting on every decision, every instinct I had ignored, and every time I had trusted to isolate. Running a business with family involved wasn't just about deadlines and revenue, it was about navigating emotions, loyalty, and boundaries I hadn't fully understood until now. I felt stronger, sharper, and more strategic, not just in business, but in how I approached relationships and trust in general. The betrayal had left scars, yes, but it also taught me resilience in ways nothing else could. I also found a strange sense of empathy for Ryan. I began to understand why he acted the way he did. Ambition mixed with insecurity. Charm as a tool, overconfidence as armor. It didn't excuse his actions, but it reframed them. I realized that some people will take risks that harm others to prove themselves. And the only way to protect yourself is to anticipate it. I had learned to balance family loyalty with self-preservation. It's a lesson that had cost me sleepless nights, but ultimately felt invaluable in the quieter moments. I focused on rebuilding what had been shaken. I nurtured client relationships personally, implemented systems that prevented unilateral decisions, and maintained clear boundaries with Ryan. The business began to stabilize, growing steadily as I regained control of both the workflow and the narrative. The sense of power returned not over him, but over my own life and decisions. I no longer felt like I was at the mercy of someone else's charm or recklessness. I even started imagining the future differently. Instead of fearing betrayal, I felt prepared to face it, equipped with evidence, strategy, and emotional clarity. I realized that empowerment didn't come from revenge alone. It came from understanding the patterns, protecting what was yours, and letting others face the natural consequences of their choices. But even with growth and clarity, a small part of me stayed wary. Ryan was still my brother, unpredictable and clever, and I knew that the next time he overstepped, I'd be ready, but would he ever truly learn? Or would I be forced to watch him stumble again? By the time we reached the final stage, everything had shifted. Ryan had retreated into a humbler version of himself, quietly nursing the wounds of his mistakes, while I had reclaimed full control over the business I had built from the ground up. The clients were stable, operations smooth, and for the first time in months, I felt a deep sense of peace. I realized that the most satisfying part wasn't the humiliation he endured, was the quiet, strategic way I had protected everything I cared about without losing my integrity or letting rage dictate my actions. One evening, he came to me hesitant, almost sheepish. I want to apologize, he said, his voice low. I messed up and I see that now. I want to make things right. I listened, calm, weighing every word, feeling a mixture of lingering resentment and cautious hope. I told him, carefully, that he had lessons to learn, that some bridges might never be fully restored, and that trust wasn't automatic, it had to be earned. He nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation in a way he hadn't before. I reflected on how far we had both come. The business had survived, stronger than ever, and I had grown into a leader who could balance empathy with accountability. Ryan had learned the hard way that charm alone couldn't replace competence, honesty, and respect for others' work. And I had learned that patience, observation, and careful planning could turn betrayal into an opportunity for empowerment. In the end, there was closure, not in dramatic confrontation or revenge, but in the quiet affirmation that I had protected my life, my work, and my peace of mind. Ryan faced the consequences of his choices, and I reclaimed mine. The apartment felt lighter, the hum of the laptop reassuring rather than tense, and I finally allowed myself to exhale. As I looked back, I realized the ultimate lesson. Family and ambition are complicated, but you can survive betrayal with strategy, patience, and self-respect. Ryan had been humbled, the business had been preserved, and I had emerged stronger. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that if he ever tried to cross me again, I would already be 10 steps ahead, calm, prepared, and unshakable. The story wasn't about winning against him. It was about winning back myself.